Brought to you by WikiVD Documentaries. Mount Everest.
Mount Everest, also known in Nepal as Sagarmāthā, and in Tibetic languages China as Chomolungma, is Earth's highest mountain. Its peak is above sea level. Mount Everest is in the Mahalangur Range. The international border between China and Nepal runs across Everest's summit point. Nearby peaks include Lhotse, Nuptse, and Changtse, among others.
Another nearby peak is Khumbutse, and many of the highest mountains in the world are near Mount Everest. In 1715, China surveyed the mountain while mapping Chinese territory, and depicted it as Mount Qomolangma no later than 1719. In 1856, the Great Trigonometrical Survey of India established the first published height of the mountain, then known as Peak 15, at. The current official height of is recognized by China, and Nepal was established by a 1955 Indian survey and subsequently confirmed by a Chinese survey in 1975. In 2005, China remeasured the height of the mountain and got a result of 8,844.43 meters. An argument regarding the height between China and Nepal lasted 5 years from 2005 to 2010. China argued it should be measured by its rock height of 8,844 meters, but Nepal said it should be measured by its snow height of 8,848 meters.
In 2010, an agreement was finally reached by both sides that the height of Everest is 8,848 meters. And Nepal recognizes China's claim that the rock height of Everest is 8,844 meters. In 1865, Everest was given its official English name by the Royal Geographical Society, upon a recommendation by Andrew Waugh, the British Surveyor General of India. As there appeared to be several different local names, Waugh chose to name the mountain after his predecessor in the post, Sir George Everest. Despite George Everest's objections, Mount Everest attracts many climbers, some of them highly experienced mountaineers. There are two main climbing routes, one approaching the summit from the southeast in Nepal and the other from the north in Tibet, China. While not posing substantial technical climbing challenges on the standard route, Everest presents dangers such as altitude sickness, weather, and wind, as well as significant hazards from avalanches and the Khumbutse fall. There are well over 200 corpses on the mountain, some of which serve as landmarks. The first recorded efforts to reach Everest's summit were made by British mountaineers, as Nepal did not allow foreigners into the country at the time. The British made several attempts on the North Ridge route from the Tibetan side. After the first reconnaissance expedition by the British in 1921 reached on the North Col, the 1922 expedition pushed the North Ridge route up to, marking the first time a human had climbed above. 7 porters were killed in an avalanche on the descent from the North Col. The 1924 expedition resulted in one of the greatest mysteries on Everest. To this day, George Mallory and Andrew Irvine made a final summit attempt on the 8th of June, but never returned, sparking debate as to whether or not they were the first to reach the top.
They had been spotted high on the mountain that day, but disappeared in the clouds, never to be seen again, until Mallory's body was found in 1999 at on the north face. Tenzing Norgay and Edmund Hillary made the first official ascent of Everest in 1953, using the Southeast Ridge route.
Tenzing had reached the previous year as a member of the 1952 Swiss expedition. The Chinese mountaineering team of Wang Fuzhou, Gonpo, and Qiu Yinhua made the first reported ascent of the peak from the North Ridge on the 25th of May 1960. Early surveys. In 1802, the British began the Great Trigonometric Survey of India to fix the locations, heights, and names of the world's highest mountains. Starting in southern India, the survey teams moved northward using giant theodolites, each weighing and requiring 12 men to measure heights as accurately as possible. They reached the Himalayan foothills by the 1830s, but Nepal was unwilling to allow the British to enter the country due to suspicions of political aggression and possible annexation. Several requests by the surveyors to enter Nepal were turned down. The British were forced to continue their observations from Terai, a region south of Nepal which is parallel to the Himalayas.
Conditions in Terai were difficult, because of torrential rains and malaria. 3 survey officers died from malaria while 2 others had to retire, because of failing health. Nonetheless, in 1847, the British continued the survey and began detailed observations of the Himalayan peaks from observation stations up to distant,
weather-restricted work to the last 3 months of the year. In November 1847, Andrew Waugh, the British Surveyor General of India, made several observations from the Sewajpur station at the east end of the Himalayas. Kangchenjunga was then considered the highest peak in the world, and with interest he noted a peak beyond it, about away. John Armstrong, one of Waugh's subordinates, also saw the peak from a site farther west and called it Peak B.
Waugh would later write that the observations indicated that Peak B was higher than Kangchenjunga, but given the great distance of the observations, closer observations were required for verification. The following year, Waugh sent a survey official back to Terai to make closer observations of Peak B, but clouds thwarted his attempts. In 1849, Waugh dispatched James Nicholson to the area, who made 2 observations from Jiral, away. Nicholson then took the largest theodolite and headed east, obtaining over 30 observations from 5 different locations, with the closest being from the peak. Nicholson retreated to Patna on the Ganges to perform the necessary calculations based on his observations. His raw data gave an average height of for Peak B, but this did not consider light refraction, which distorts heights. However, the number clearly indicated that Peak B was higher than Kangchenjunga. Nicholson contracted malaria and was forced to return home without finishing his calculations. Michael Hennessy, one of Waugh's assistants, had begun designating peaks based on Roman numerals, with Kangchenjunga named Peak IX. Peak B now became known as Peak 15. In 1852, stationed at the survey headquarters in Dehradun, Radhanath Sikdar, an Indian mathematician and surveyor from Bengal, was the first to identify Everest as the world's highest peak, using trigonometric calculations based on Nicholson's measurements. An official announcement that Peak 15 was the highest was delayed for several years as the calculations were repeatedly verified. Waugh began work on Nicholson's data in 1854, and along with his staff spent almost 2 years working on the numbers, having to deal with the problems of light refraction, barometric pressure, and temperature over the vast distances of the observations. Finally, in March 1856 he announced his findings in a letter to his deputy in Calcutta. Kangchenjunga was declared to be, while Peak 15 was given the height of. Waugh concluded that Peak 15 was, most probably, the highest in the world. Peak 15 was calculated to be exactly high, but was publicly declared to be in order to avoid the impression that an exact height of was nothing more than a rounded estimate. Waugh is therefore wittily credited with being the first person to put 2 feet on top of Mount Everest. Thank you for watching. Brought to you by WikiVD Documentaries. Please like and subscribe below. Please like and subscribe below.